At 94, I've watched friends walk into nursing homes and never come back the same. They don't pass away in those places, they just fade. Their vibrant, stubborn spirits are slowly replaced by a printed daily schedule. They trade their life's narrative for someone else's illusion of safety. People assume that at my age, my biggest fear is dying. It isn't. My absolute biggest fear is waking up in a place where I am just a room number, where my choices are managed, and my days are dictated by a clipboard. That isn't safety. That's erasure. And I refuse to let my identity be organized out of existence. Moving into Robert and Susan's home was an exercise in quiet, well-intentioned erasure. Their house is beautiful, practically gleaming with modern efficiency and busy schedules. But from the moment I set my suitcase down in the lavender-scented guest room, a profound and heavy realization washed over me. When you are 94 years old and living under your child's roof, you instantly become a guest, and you never, ever stop being one. They had built a vibrant, demanding life. School runs for the grandkids, corporate board meetings, neighborhood committees, and into this tightly wound clockwork I was inserted like a gear that didn't quite fit. Everyone was unfailingly polite, but politeness can be the coldest thing in the world when it replaces the messy comfort of real belonging. Dinner was served at precisely 6 p.m. Every evening, Susan would place a bowl of heart-healthy, tragically bland oatmeal or steamed vegetables in front of me, smiling that tight, encouraging smile you give to a toddler. I ate it, of course. I swallowed the blandness and smiled back, expressing my gratitude. But as I chewed, my mind wandered back to my own kitchen. I missed the late nights, making that chicken sandwich at 9 p.m. just because the craving hit me. I missed the distinct aroma of my own spice rack, the familiar creak of my hallway floorboards, and the absolute, unquestioned liberty of my own appetite. After dinner, I would retreat to the living room, sitting upright on a designer sofa that was far too soft, listening to the relentless ticking of their expensive minimalist wall clock. Tick, tick, tick. It sounded less like time passing and more like a quiet countdown of my remaining autonomy. One evening, I heard them through the thin drywall, just fragments of hushed whispers. Robert saying something about adjusting the morning bathroom routine. Susan sighing as she figured out how to rearrange her Tuesday Zoom meetings just to drive me to the pharmacy. I sat, frozen, in the shadows of the living room. It hit me right then. I wasn't their mother anymore. I was a logistics issue. I was a scheduling conflict that required constant management. That is the devastating tragedy of trading your independence for physical safety. You don't just lose the walls of your home. You lose the right to author your own days, waking up to find yourself nothing more than a polite, fading visitor in the final chapters of your own life. After a month at Roberts, the guest room felt like a polite prison. I insisted on going home. We compromised on option 2, professional in-home care. Enter Linda. Linda operated with the brisk, unwavering efficiency of an emergency room nurse. She wore sterile-looking scrubs, spoke in a tone that was loudly cheerful but utterly devoid of warmth, and immediately set about fall-proofing my existence. She didn't call me Eleanor. To her, I was Mrs. Miller, a delicate, elderly assignment to be monitored between the hours of 8 a.m. and 4 p.m., She wasn't cruel, she was simply professional, and that was exactly the problem. To a woman of 94, a kitchen is not just a room. It is an archive of muscle memory. I knew exactly which drawer stuck, where the heavy wooden spoons lived, and that the salt always, always sat on the second shelf, right next to the paprika. By her third day, Linda had completely reorganized my pantry. That evening, after Linda had clocked out, I went to make a simple bowl of soup. I reached blindly for the salt. My hand met empty air. I stood there staring at a neatly labeled, perfectly alphabetized spice rack that felt entirely alien. I couldn't find the salt. And in that agonizingly quiet moment, it hit me. I couldn't find myself either. I had survived a world war, the loss of my husband, and decades of profound change, only to be reduced to a patient in my own home, stripped of the silent, dignified authority of knowing where my own things belonged. The final breaking point came in a crisp white envelope. Sitting at the dining table, I opened the monthly invoice from Linda's agency. I put on my reading glasses and stared at the numbers. My pension is modest, built on a lifetime of careful saving. In just 4 weeks, a terrifying chunk of it had vanished. I was draining my life savings, the very foundation of my independence. For what? To have my spices alphabetized, to be watched? I realized I was paying a premium price for supervised loneliness, and I knew right then that I could not afford to buy my own erasure. Robert's final plea was option 3. We drove to a sprawling, manicured, luxury senior community. It smelled faintly of lemon bleach, desperately masked by artificial vanilla. The admissions director, a relentlessly cheerful woman in her 30s, gave us the grand tour. She called me sweetheart within 5 minutes of meeting me, a word that instantly shrank my 94 years of life into a patronizing caricature. Then she opened the door to what they proposed would be my new life. It was a single, flawlessly clean room, and there, mounted on the pale yellow wall, was a pristine whiteboard detailing the daily itinerary. I stared at the neat black marker ink. 10 DAC a.m., crafts. 12 Fox p.m., lunch. 2 Fox p.m., movie in the common area. I stood there and felt a deep, chilling hollow in my chest. I had made my own decisions every single day for 9 decades, and now a cheerful stranger was going to dictate my afternoon. I looked at that board and thought, what if I just want to watch the clouds drift by at 2 Quar? Robert handed me the glossy contract and a pen. I didn't even uncap it. I handed it back. I chose my old, creaky house. I knew the stairs were steep and the risks were real, but I would rather take my chances with gravity than surrender my soul to a printed schedule. In my dusty, imperfect house, I am Eleanor Miller. Here, I would just be the fading resident of room 402. I didn't have a miracle answer. I was simply a 94-year-old woman who had run out of other options. What happened next wasn't some polished, inspirational strategy. It was just life colliding in the driveway on a rainy Tuesday morning. I was outside, a struggle with my mailbox, when the new neighbor, Sarah, arrived, juggling a fussy, beautiful toddler named Leo and 2 overflowing paper bags of groceries. Sarah looked exactly like I did 65 years ago, completely, bone-deep exhausted, desperate for a spare hand. I held the grocery bags. A few hours later, I was sitting in my living room with Leo's small, warm weight in my lap, reading a story. It hadn't been on any whiteboard, and yet it was the most important thing I could be doing at 2 Fao in the afternoon. That moment opened a messy, beautiful lifeline. It wasn't about professional care. It was about mutual need. I started watching Leo 2 mornings a week. I didn't just babysit. I was Leo's 94-year-old history teacher, storyteller, and grandmother. In exchange, I sat at the table with Sarah, helping her map out a budget on her laptop, teaching her my grandmother's chicken soup recipe, and reminding her that some days just being enough is a monumental victory. In return, Sarah became my stealthy guardian. She was the one who gently insisted on the grab bars in the bathroom and the kitchen, and she didn't mind my creative basil-killing phases until I finally grew a new plant from seed. She was the one who patiently sat with me for 45 minutes, helping me set up the new fall detection app on my smartwatch. This isn't a fairy tale. I am 94. Gravity is a relentless opponent, but my solution isn't a facility, it is a synthesis of my stubborn will, modern technology, and the raw, essential grace of a knock on a neighbor's door. We have spent so much time building a society that treats old age as a medical condition to be contained or a logistical problem to be neatly solved. But growing old isn't a puzzle to be fixed. It is a stage of life that is still meant to be deeply, messily lived, with all its risks, its quiet triumphs, and its stubborn independence. If you are watching this, looking back at the past, or trying to navigate the future for someone you love, remember this. Physical safety without personal autonomy is just a velvet cage. I know the stairs are steep. I know the years are heavy. But tonight it is 8:30, and I am eating exactly what I want, inside the walls that hold my history. I am not a room number. I am not a scheduling conflict. I am not managed. I am Eleanor Miller, and I am exactly where I belong. It started on a Tuesday afternoon. Robert and Susan sat across from me with that unmistakable look, the one that tells you they've already had a long conversation about you without you. Robert looked at me, but he wasn't seeing the woman who raised him. He was looking at me like I was a fragile antique that might shatter if the wind blew too hard. "Mom," he said, gently tapping the brochure, "we need to talk about your options." Options. I've learned to detest that word. In this context, it doesn't mean freedom. It means a decision has already been made, and they're just dressing it up to feel like a choice. They laid it out: move in with them, hire full-time home care, or transition to a facility. Their intentions were pure. They loved me, and I saw the genuine fear in Robert's eyes. But there is a cruel irony in how the fierce love of our children can slowly suffocate our independence. So I agreed. I agreed to pack a bag and move into their guest room for a month. Not because I was surrendering, but because I needed to show them what they couldn't yet understand: that wrapping me in complete safety was going to cost me my happiness.